Welcome to the Intercut podcast channel, the weekly place to hear the latest on movies, TV, and entertainment that people can't cut away from. I'm your co-host, Zachary Shevich, and joining me, all the best memories are his. It's Arturo Zurita.
I think since we started this podcast around 2017, I've been saying Danny's my favorite filmmaker, so this... I haven't cared about any of the brackets up until this point right here, so this is the big one.
You better have brought your A game for this one, especially considering how much you hyped Denny up on these movies. We also had to bring in someone who knows that fear is the mind killer, our returning champion, Chase
from a long time ago.
Man, thanks so much for coming back on the pod.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. We talked a little bit before we hopped on here. The last time I recorded with the boys, I clogged Zach's toilet, and it was an absolute nightmare situation that every year I get reminded on my Snapchat of that traumatic experience.
Me too.
So now I'm glad we can do this virtually so I don't clog your toilet this time around.
Yeah, my toilet will be spared. Unfortunately, we don't know the situation at Chase's place. We'll update on that later. But we're mostly going to focus on all of our favorite filmmakers. I feel like I can say that safely. Denis Villeneuve, or as a good friend of ours likes to refer to him,
Director Denis Villeneuve.
Director Denis Villeneuve. And Director Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah, thank you for the quick plug there, Lightscaber Jackson. All right, so Denis, a director who I believe is 56 years old now, hailing from Quebec, Canada, the French-Canadian auteur who has really emerged as one of our leading voices in blockbuster filmmaking, sci-fi filmmaking, just really a lot of, I think, young men's favorite filmmaker right now. Chase, why don't you lead us off? When you hear the possibility of a new Denis Villeneuve movie, what does that feel like to you? What are you expecting? What has he brought to the table that you know you're in store for anytime he makes a new film?
Man, I don't even know where to go from there. That's a deep question, but I think there's
starting off easy.
Yeah.
Philosophically speaking.
Of course. I think there's at least at this current moment of cinema, there's very few people that I feel like I could trust pretty consistently in terms of delivering, and it's a really small list. I think everyone compares him to Nolan, and it seems like even though it is the most basic pick, I think there's different generations of filmmakers are defined by specific people. Like you could argue Tarantino was the 90s, Scorsese was like the 70s, early 80s, and I really do think in terms of summing up where we are in terms of all the other blockbuster filmmaking that we get that aren't from these two guys, I think they kind of go back and forth in terms of who's the most important director right now, and I think they kind of deserve that title. In terms of Denis, though, I mean, I don't know if you could find somebody that had a better streak of movies in such a short amount of time than he did, from Prisoners pretty much up until, was it Arrival, Blade Runner, where he kind of took a 2-year break to do Dune or whatever like that, but he was on a roll that none of us have ever seen before. It was almost like every year you got, it's like how we used to get a new Saw movie every year. We got a new Denis movie every single year, and they were all bangers. They were all completely different, which we'll get into, even though a lot of people argue he's the best sci-fi guy out there. I think there's a case to be made he's the best thriller guy out there. I think his thrillers are better than Fincher's thrillers, and we could get into that later on. But yeah, but I stand by them. I think this guy is truly someone special, someone that we need in today's world, and we're always talking about who is the best filmmaker, and I think that conversation is always a hard one to have because there's always going to be personal biases. There's going to be people that come in and say someone like Wes Anderson, which I completely get why someone would say that, but I think...
But they're wrong.
I would say they are wrong because Denis kind of sums up the... I guess him and Nolan are kind of these guys that they are, for lack of a better word, the new Spielbergs, right? Like you could say Jordan Peele's kind of trying to go for that thing too. I think both of these guys are better than Peele right now. I think Peele could get to that point, but yeah, I think these are the guys, like how we talk about the Beatles, all these years later. I think these two are kind of becoming those guys right now for movies. Maybe they just fall off a cliff over the next 10 years because some of these other filmmakers, that's why Tarantino's stopping, you know? So, yeah, he's just one of the best right now. So we'll see where that goes from here.
I agree.
Definitely. You gave us a lot of great points there. Art, he's dropped Christopher Nolan's name. He's dropped David Fincher's name. Is there a filmmaker that you think is most analogous to the types of movies that we get from Denis Villeneuve?
I think both of those are really good, specifically Nolan, because when they did the whole rollout for IMAX for Dune, I don't know if you saw those videos, but Nolan was like, I'm Christopher Nolan and he's not. Like, bro, he was trying to say, this is my territory right here. I thought that was adorable. That's when you know that there's like respect, but also a little glimmer in his eye of like, yo, that's the next up. Yeah, I think Denny has taken it. In terms of him becoming the sci-fi guy, you almost forget that streak that Chase was talking about. He was doing not just thrillers, but cerebral stuff, in my opinion. I think the psychology of Prisoners, Enemy being one of my favorite movies. I think he brings something to the table that, for lack of a better term, most people just say it's cinema. You're coming out and you feel like you just saw an art piece. But I think the Spielberg comparisons are perfect because it doesn't feel like a chore. It doesn't feel like you're watching those rinky-dink movies that we go up to catch at Sundance that nobody ever talks about afterwards. These are big blockbusters that he's been able to take from that 2000s run up to now, where it's just like banger after banger. Blade Runner being as massive as it is, both Dune movies, there's no reason the Dune movie should be as big as they are. But I think Nolan with Oppenheimer have pioneered this new sense of people being willing to go and invest themselves into these worlds. And that's why I think he's one of the best filmmakers working today.
Definitely. I mean, Christopher Nolan probably is the apt one to bring up. I think both of them as directors have a really innate ability to take these very like big ideas and heady themes and sort of distill them down to kind of like a really digestible essence where none of their movies are particularly like deep philosophical explorations of any of those ideas, but they all speak powerfully to those ideas through cinema, through making these really incredible moving paintings, right? And they have found a path kind of like right through the eye of the needle in making their films like intellectually stimulating, but also like viscerally entertaining. And that's why, you know, I think they've engendered a lot of praise and that their movies are revisitable. You can discuss them and pull them apart, but you also just are really entertained by them. They make the kind of movies that people want to go see 20 times in theaters, even if you are a Zendaya stan or not. It's like they're just working with a set of tools that not a lot of filmmakers have in their handbag. And yeah, I mean, it's really great stuff. Interesting also that Chase talks about that run he was on, because I think it's sort of interesting the way that we'll get more into this when we get into the bracket, but as a French Canadian filmmaker, it almost feels like he was refining his craft and his vision in those French language movies so that when he did come to Hollywood and attack it, he was just fully ready to burst through the door and announce himself as a major filmmaker. And, you know, with two movies back to back in 2013, Prisoner's Enemy, and then that run of Sicario, Arrival, Blade Runner 2049 in 2015, 16, 17, not a lot of filmmakers have had that kind of output in like a 5 films in a 5-year span. It's definitely something to envy.
Do you feel that he's too dry when it comes to his characters? I feel like that's the biggest critique that I find myself usually having to defend. Dune is so dry. Blade Runner, damn near robots. Sicario is like the most just straightforward people. I find a lot of emotions within those characters because of just how like stoic they are. But do you guys think that that's probably the one thing that he doesn't have that Spielberg has a one up on? You guys mentioned Jordan Peele. Shout out Jordan Peele. He's got 3 movies. But my mind's getting up there. I think they handle maybe something that more audiences have felt joy in, I guess. I don't know. But if you understand what I'm saying.
In terms of dry characters, I only feel that way about one of the movies a lot of people love, which I'll save for the bracket. But I think for the most part, even if the character comes off a bit dry, I think he's one of the best in blockbuster filmmaking that gets a great performance out of somebody because... There you go. I mean, going through, I'll save some of it for the bracket again, but there's some people on this list, their best performance is in one of these movies. You know what I mean? Okay. And I don't think every blockbuster director is necessarily great at doing that. So for me, it depends on the movie.
Rated R for nudity. That's the one, huh?
Yeah, that one.
The best performance by that font. It better not be Enemy.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Like, I think Spielberg and Peele are interesting filmmakers to bring up in comparison, because I think those are two filmmakers who probably do a better job of giving you finely crafted characters and giving you people who feel like people you've maybe met, whereas I think Christopher Nolan is subject to this criticism too. The characters feel a little bit more surface level, but I think sometimes that is in service of the movie that they're trying to make. You know, a lot of their films, I feel like, play on very like emotional notes that they want you to almost project yourself onto the characters, and it's in that maybe lack of specificity sometimes that it makes it a little bit more universally relatable. Whereas, you know, I love a lot of, you know, the output from Spielberg and from Peele, but I don't often see myself in those characters in that same way. So there's pluses and minuses, and I don't know if I'd necessarily say I prefer one or to the other, but yeah, I could see that criticism. It's not something that keeps me from enjoying the films, though. I think they're really good. I do think like the major difference for me separating Nolan and Villeneuve is Nolan. I feel like there's generally this sense of like hopefulness and optimism throughout his films. You know, heart and the power of love is a recurring thing in especially his big blockbusters. Whereas Denis is one of our most cynical big blockbuster filmmakers. Like, he is not afraid to unsettle you, to point out the ugliness underneath people's character, and just kind of disturb through the power of his filmmaking. So a lot of
movies, they're like impending doom. I'm looking at each one. Each one is impending doom, but it might be okay. Only one way to find out.
Exactly.
Damn.
Only one way to find out the winner of our bracket. Let's take a quick look at the movies available, because we have put, I believe it's 12 feature films in the bracket, alongside a notable 4 short films that we wanted to talk about. And then one of the feature films is only a segment that he did, but we'll get into all of that in a bit. The bracket is organized the way we have been sorting these brackets recently, in that the number 1 seed goes to the most popular film on Letterboxd, and then the number 16 seed goes to the 16th most popular film on Letterboxd. In this case, that would be Dune from 2021 going up against Rewind Fast Forward, the very first short film that Denis Villeneuve put out. For the sake of the clarity of our discussion, I've rearranged some of the order of these matchups so we can kind of work sequentially through his film. But you'll if you're following along with the bracket, which you can download in a link in the description or just check out in the video, you'll have an idea of what matchups are going on when. So why don't we start out with that matchup that I mentioned first, which is Rewind Fast Forward versus Dune. Rewind Fast Forward being the 1994 short film he made that's sort of a documentary narrative hybrid in which a photojournalist tries to recall his travels to Jamaica by fast forwarding and rewinding through footage of his journey, where he's simultaneously intimidated and intrigued by the local population. Art, what did you make about this one?
A lot of editing. I thought at first it was him who might have been narrating it, because it does this interesting thing of going from English to French, right? And I thought that was a cool aspect of it, considering that it is a dude who's visiting another culture and trying to understand parts of it while he's going in and out of his own language. I found out that the guy who he had in there, the narrator, does come back for Arrival. So shout out Denny. I appreciated that.
Keeping this guy's close.
Yeah, it's the coolest thing that I got from this documentary, short film,
narrative hybrid. I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting take on it. It's definitely not going to be something that takes down Dune for me, but I think out of most of the shorts that we saw, this would have been the second best out of them, in my opinion, but still not one that would stand out from the bunch.
Yeah, there's almost like early seeds of Arrival in here, with the element of like kind of traveling back and forth through memories, but it's still like very raw, very rough filmmaking. There's probably some stuff about like exoticizing foreign cultures that could be considered problematic nowadays, but I mean, I think it's like a debut film from a filmmaker who I think was like 26, 27 at the time. Like, it's a pretty bold announcement of your talent.
This would be his debut?
I believe so. I think it was the first.
think it was, yeah.
If you look at his Wikipedia, at least, it's the first movie we get from him. Chase, what did you make about Rewind Fast Forward?
Yeah, I watched it this morning, and I would be lying if I said I understood everything that happened in it.
You were rewinding and fast forwarding.
Yeah, I was. I rewinded it a couple because I had heard, because I've been working on this Denis Villeneuve ranked video for like a month now, and I remember I hadn't watched this, but I did research, and I thought the way it was described, it was just himself stuck in Jamaica and just documenting everything. So when it opens with like this black box that's like going into his mind and dreams and stuff like that, I was like, what the hell is this? So the more it kept going on, usually like it gave me some film schoolish vibes where I felt like I would roll my eyes, but I thought it was a good version of that kind of movie. Like I thought a lot of the moments with the Jamaican people were actually like how Zach, we were talking about all the pessimistic nature of his movies. It gave you a little optimism and pessimism at the same time, because you're like, all these people are so optimistic about how they could change the world and stuff like that. And I found that aspect of it really cool. I'm kind of a sucker for like real island life, you know, not like that touristy stuff, and seeing that type of culture. So I thought there was a lot of cool stuff in there. I'd be curious. I try to do my research on how much of this was like real documentary work and some of it was like, okay, we're going to set up and make you like an actor type thing. I'd really be curious to see that part of it. But I would say this was maybe my favorite of the shorts. I'm not like married to that answer, but I thought it was interesting enough for sure.
And he would have been 24, right? So,
okay, so even earlier
in that
than
film
I thought.
school era, or 24, I guess somewhere around there. Piece 57.
Yeah, no, but it was, you know, early
in his 20s.
And it's interesting, although like I can't say I for sure see like the guy who would go on to make Dune. So we will take Dune in this matchup. And the next matchup is going to be between Cosmos and Blade Runner 2049. Cosmos is a 6-part anthology film from Canada in which 6 different up-and-coming Canadian directors told stories that were loosely connected by a common character named Cosmos, a Greek immigrant taxi driver in Montreal. Villeneuve's section, Le Technetium, follows a filmmaker nervously traveling to a TV interview, and he takes a ride with that cab driver. I only watched Denis' section. Chase, you said you watched through Denis' section and then stopped. And then Art, you watched the whole thing.
I didn't see the one where the guy reconnects with his ex-girlfriend.
No,
but she got a boob job, so the whole movie he just wants to see them. Bro, I was like, what is this movie? This better not be his section. And now I'm disappointed it's not, because that's a wild take on that one.
Well, you just sold me on finishing it, so I'm going to finish it later.
There's another one where, as Zach said, the cab driver picks up several people. There's also another one where a young woman gets stood up on a date, and then some dude takes her and wines and dines her. Another one where a guy's trying to figure out if he's HIV positive or not. There's so much happening in this movie. But I didn't think it was bad. It's also available on YouTube, so if some of you need to find it, just search up Cosmos. It's there, 1996. Shout out to whoever uploaded that. But I thought it was intriguing. I never found it to be boring. But I actually do think his may not be like top 2 segments in the movie. The rest of it and how it comes together is more interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I thought his segment had like, it felt like an anxiety nightmare, and it reminded me a bit of like watching Scorsese's After Hours, but obviously kind of like a film student take on it. It's that, you know, sort of chaos happening around you and the weird characters coming across like that movie. Particularly like once he actually arrives for the interview itself, it got pretty bizarre and fun. But yeah, I mean, it's uneven, and it's not that interesting. It's also interesting. I think we see in his short film work, he makes these much talkier movies, and obviously more recently he's had quotes where he's talked about not liking dialogue in his films.
Now we know why.
Chase, how was your experience with Cosmos?
Yeah, I thought it was like a fun little thing. I didn't turn it off because I didn't like the movie. I just was pressed for time and knew we had to do this pretty soon. So I liked what I saw. It gave me, not to compare him to Nolan again, but kind of like that Following vibe where it's like you could tell someone has an idea, you know, and they're not doing a terrible job at doing it. You know, they're kind of getting that point across with whatever budget they had. I thought it was definitely a fun time. Would I say you have to drop everything you're doing and watch it. Probably not, but it does. I always love the charm of older movies like this from directors that go off and become Denis. You know, I love seeing the early stuff. And compared to some of the other stuff we're going to talk about soon, I think it's an enjoyable time. I wouldn't pick it over Blade Runner 2049, but maybe somebody out there would. So
Yeah.
There's also Serial Killer. Planning his next victim. That's like another one. Yeah. So
Yeah, the movie seems
it's an
pretty all over
interesting
the place.
amalgamation, but it's Blade Runner.
All right, and then in 1998, Denis would go on to make his first feature, August 32nd on Earth. It goes up in the first round against Sicario. This film is about a woman who escapes a car accident without injury and decides that in order to give her life purpose, she should have a baby. So she asks her best friend to get her pregnant, and together they travel from Montreal to Salt Lake City in order to conceive the child. It is pretty interesting to watch knowing who Denis became, because it's kind of like a lighthearted romance for the most part. Like, it's almost romantic comedy skewing. Like, I feel like
Dune 2?
You know, the premise at least reminds me of stuff like Friends with Kids, although this is a little bit more like ennui tinged. It doesn't, you know, it's got like elements of French New Wave and like early 90s melodramas. Like, it almost feels like Reality Bites in some portions. But it doesn't really feel that distinct. Like, I kind of felt like it lacked in personality. Chase, did you like August 32nd on Earth?
no, I think it's kind of. I'll just be. It's his worst movie of the
Damn.
features,
Of the features,
that
at
he
least?
completely
Yeah.
directed. Yeah, I think it's not like bad. You know what I mean? But it's definitely not good. The Salt Lake City thing made me feel like, did he do this just to try and get into Sundance? Like, it was kind of like this odd choice to have the baby at.
Right.
It doesn't really go anywhere I expected. I thought the concept was cooler than the actual movie. Like, I like the idea of you get in a car accident and now every day you see life as a new opportunity. You get your August 32nd. Like, that's all nice and warm and whatever. But I agree. Like, the first time a joke was dropped, I was kind of surprised. You know, I think it's like when she's at the doctor's office and they start joking about like his name or something like that. I watched it like 2 months ago, so I kind of forget. But I was like, oh, he's trying to be funny. Like, this is interesting, you know? And
Right. Because there's sometimes humor in Denis movies, but there's not really jokes. And this one had kind of attempts at jokes.
Yeah, it really took me off guard. And there's like some cool shots, don't get me wrong. And there's... I don't think it's the worst thing I've ever seen by any means, but I would never recommend this to anybody.
So this is the only one I missed because I think Zach told me only way to watch this is through like a Fandor subscription.
Yeah.
Is this just Maelstrom in reverse? Like what?
They're
very similar in a way. Like, they have
Two
the
hit
same
and
kind
runs?
of device. Yeah.
Pregnant women taking different routes.
Yeah, I'm like, who did Denis hit? You know what I mean? Like, what happened in his
right?
own...
What
Maelstrom
trauma
is
is he
way
trying to
funnier
get
for
over?
the record. For the record.
Well, let's give the win to Sicario and talk about Maelstrom, which is Villeneuve's second feature film, a paranoid thriller about a young woman whose life starts to fall apart after a hit-and-run incident. It's also narrated by a fish. Art, you a fish guy?
Not filet-o-fish talking heads like this, no, but I remember seeing Chase's review for this about how it's the craziest intro, like the wildest 3 minutes. There's no way. The talking fish and what it's followed up by is even more insane.
Yeah, it's like Big Mouth Billy Bass or something like that. Like, what? It's such a strange choice, and I'm not
Interesting
entirely
device.
sure it works or is needed, but it's memorable.
Oh, look,
for
I'm not gonna
sure.
say I liked it, but I thought it was an interesting take for
Yeah.
what they're going for. Because a lot of this movie is, you know, her having a lot of conversations with her friend and what she's dealing with in the aftermath of it, and what things she uses to cope with the beginning of the movie. And the fish side of it, I mean, it becomes a recurring motif. You know, like there's imagery outside of the intro where there are fishes like being mutilated on top of what they intercut in between there, but. I thought it was an interesting one to visit for the first time because I think the only French one that I had seen was Indendies. So this felt more like the Denny that I know than what the short films were.
Yeah, the Villeneuve that we're familiar with is maybe starting to emerge in Maelstrom. And, it's funny because that whole fish thing, I think, isn't even that necessary, because I found the thriller element of it to be pretty satisfying and interesting. It started maybe a bit slow, but it becomes really intriguing, especially as he starts to play with the chronology of things. It's odd because in both the whole idea of like covering up something you did and the tone of it reminded me of Christopher Nolan's second film, Insomnia, or maybe his third if you're counting Following, which actually came out just a year after this. So even in that way, they're mirroring each other a little bit. Chase, did you like Maelstrom?
I think it's all right. I think I like the outline of Maelstrom more than the actual movie. Like, I think once it really gets going and she meets the son of the guy that she killed and that whole thing pretty much, I think it becomes more interesting. Everything before that, I was a little bored by. I actually loved the fish. I thought the fish was awesome. It's so pointless, but it's so crazy.
Way you were done. You were like, come on, where's the fish?
Listen, when you think you've seen everything in cinema and you see that, you're like, okay, like this is something fresh. I understand why he quit filmmaking for like a decade after making it, but it's interesting. You know what I mean? It's interesting. I wouldn't watch it again.
Do we know what he did in that interim? Because he wouldn't make another short or feature film until I believe 2007. I know he spent some time at the University of Quebec studying filmmaking. I don't know if that was exactly when, but it took him a while to get back into it.
I was listening to he did some sort of interview, like an hour-long thing in front of an audience. I was listening to some, and he pretty much said his first two movies, he just thought he put too much of himself into it. He wasn't thinking about the audience, and he said this movie was a hit, and he felt empty after, and he kind of just left and chose to not pick up a camera until he had the story that he wanted to do. And maybe that's where that streak of movies comes in, because he even said, if I didn't stop, I would have stopped completely. And he needed that break to kind of figure out what kind of filmmaker he wanted to be. So, I mean, that he took some years off, but then like we said, I can't think of a streak of movies that came out that fast that were that good by anybody. So I guess it paid off for him.
Worth it.
Definitely. So he gets back to filmmaking in 2007 with the short film 120 Seconds to Get Elected.
Take another break.
This is a short film shot entirely on cell phones in 2007, way before that kind of thing became trendy or even really a viable option. This is a film about a politician who has 2 minutes to convince a crowd to vote for him in an election. And on one hand, it's a film that does sort of foresee our current era of populist politics, where politicians will say whatever crass things they think will resonate with big groups of people in order to elevate themselves. Like the candidate feels kind of Trumpian in a certain way. But on the other hand, this is like a pretty ham-handed, over-dramatic presentation of those ideas with these single word title cards saying things like money, family, and army. They pop on the screen with the loud banging of a drum accompanying it. It's the opposite of subtle. Chase, what did you think about 120 Seconds to Get Elected?
I'm definitely going to pick it over Prisoners. It really affected me a lot.
You're ready to vote for him?
Yeah, again, I was pretty shocked that this came out in between Maelstrom and Polytechnique, because when you watch it, it feels so film school. It feels like an assignment you would do.
Right.
Yeah, I guess he could have made a career out of being a marketing campaign person, you know what I mean, and made some of those crazy ads. But yeah, I really got nothing out of this. I saw a comment on the YouTube video where someone said, oh, the more fascist he gets, his hair changes. And I'm like, okay, that's a cool little thing. He was thinking of subtle things even when he was making something like this. But yeah, it was 120 seconds. None of us will ever get back, but that's what it is.
Yeah, another one is available on YouTube. Art, are you voting for the Villeneuve candidate in the fall?
I just finished rewatching it yet again, the 120 seconds of it. And I can confirm that I like the comparison that Chase made. I could see a lot of older Fincher when he was doing the ads, the propaganda stuff. This is a lot of those side things that he was working on, where it's a lot of subliminals and stuff. I mean, not that subliminal, for being honest, but that note that you just said about his hair changing also, it's an exercise. That's what I think. We're judging them as short films when they feel more like short exercises. So it's neat, but no.
Yeah.
Hey, at least this one had some footage and not just text. Not just
Definitely.
text.
We're not going to take this one over Prisoners. And our next one, I don't think we're going to take over Indendies, but let's talk about Next Floor, his next short film in 2008. It premiered at Cannes, actually, in 2008,
Nice.
and won the Canal Plus prize for Best Short. It's an 11-minute movie about a group of people gathered for an extravagant feast where they're waited on by a team of servers when suddenly things come crashing down, literally and metaphorically. I feel like this is kind of where you can really start seeing the Villeneuve, who has a really clear vision for the look of his films, like a clean kind of composition style, really starts to emerge here and in the films coming after this one. Art, what did you think about Next Floor? Is this the film that you thought was the best of his shorts?
Oh, easily. I think just because of the presentation, the story is neat. It's also very, very goofy. The more you think about it, like if they're falling to the next floor, I mean, they don't gotta eat it the moment you set it on the table. The weight has reached. It's like a reverse platform. The movie that that also I think had shown at some festivals. It's getting a sequel, but it's like instead of it being the prisoners feasting, it shows you kind of like a metaphorical thing that these big powers that be are doing. And I had seen this one before, so I'm watching and I'm like, why does this look familiar? I think I saw this without knowing it was Denis somehow. I think around the time Platform had come out, but yeah, it's a little goofy, but I like it. I think the style's very interesting. I'm blanking on the director, but the guy who did Delicatessen, it's got that sort of vibe going for it, and I thought it was a good tone.
Yeah, it's like a pretty disgusting depiction of this feast. Like there's the oysters that kind of look like brains, and there's all these disgusting kind of slurping animalistic noises.
Good sound effects.
Yeah, it's a really like upsetting depiction of gluttony, and it feels like, I don't know if it's commenting more on like wealth hoarding or just consumerism in general, but yeah, it's got that sort of cynicism to it, but it's as you mentioned, it's got that goofiness. There's almost like Wes Anderson-esque hard zooms and funny sound effects. Chase, what did you think about Next Floor?
I like it. I think, like Art, I hadn't watched it necessarily before, but I remember when Letterboxd does their stats of best documentaries, best whatever, I think at one point they had like a best short films list, and I always saw this on there, not knowing it was Denis. So yeah, finally checked it out. It's the only short film that's a short film on this list, it feels like.
There you go.
You know what I mean? Yeah, it's cool. I don't have much more to say other than like I just think it's cool. It has, you know, a complete idea, I guess, you know, and that's what I think a lot of short films, I think Nolan even talked about this before, where some people try and squeeze a 90-minute movie into 15 minutes, and the whole thing is you should make something that could only be told in 15 minutes. So I think it's successful at that. Would I pick it over one of the best movies ever made? No, but it's a cool movie. Yeah.
Definitely. All right. So on Sundays, we'll go forward in that matchup. And next, we'll talk about Polytechnique versus Dune 2. Polytechnique depicts the true events of the 1989 École Polytechnique massacre, which is known as a terroristic attack, a misogynistic terrorist attack that happened in Canada in the late 80s. And it's a really just sort of frank and brutal depiction of a school shooting. I think, you know, obviously the filmmaking technique is there in terms of how he composes the shots. It's really considered, and I think that sort of transition that we're talking about, where he's becoming less of a talky, dialogue-driven filmmaker and more of a visual filmmaker, somebody who's communicating the story to you through his use of building the story in the shots. It's really effective here. I just don't really like it. I just don't really like the experience of this movie. I kind of wish he did something else. But I don't know. It's effective at the very least. Chase, what did you make about Polytechnique?
I'm still trying to figure out my thoughts on this movie. I still haven't written this part of my script for the ranked video just because I don't know how to put it into words. I've seen it twice. I watched it for the first time a couple years ago, and then I just rewatched it. And I don't know what it is. So that's why I feel bad saying this claim. There's something about this movie that just rubs me the wrong way a little bit, and I can't really put my finger on it. Because I don't want to say it's like too stylized, because I don't think it's that stylized, but there was a moment where, like in film school, I considered writing a school shooting script, kind of, but I know it's such a sensitive topic that I kind of went on a binge of how a bunch of other movies do it. And there are just some, I think, do a better job with it. And I don't know. It's such a touchy subject to get into, so I don't want to really I don't know. There's just something about it where I've always found that other people did it better, which I think Denny does a lot of things better than a lot of other people. But I think don't talk about Kevin. How we don't want to talk about Kevin. What's that?
We need to talk about.
We
Kevin.
need to talk about Kevin. Yeah,
I think
that's
is a movie
5,
where it kind of handles it better.
Yeah,
there's one called 0 Day, which is super underrated. It's the best found footage movie I think of all time. I just think there's certain stories that have done this better.
Elephant,
the Dirties,
Sound.
more of that comedic spin, but also not. It's I don't know. I think it's well done. I agree. There's something about it. I don't want to watch it again. I think the black and white is an effective choice, so they don't have to show the blood or anything. There's things that I definitely like about it.
It's
I don't
not
know why.
It's not artless and it's not poorly made, but I'm not sure entirely what's it's in service of, other than reminding us a thing we all know is horrifying is horrifying. I don't know. Art, what did you take away from Polytechnique?
Wow, that was pretty profound. Out of
all
the other ones here, that is obviously not all the ones that are not making it past that first round. I think it's the top of that list right there. I've been waiting to finish this movie for years. I've seen the beginning, up until the credit where it tells you the names have been changed,
right?
In order to be able to tell the story. So I'm like, what is the aftermath of this shooting? I know it's a true story. How are they going to bring that back into the movie? The way they bring that back into the movie as just a quick flash as he's walking down the hallway, I thought was insane. Just the aftermath of what you see after the incident, I think, is where it really stuck with me, because there are certain characters that you follow afterwards, and the actions that they take. We had to rewind it to be like, there's no way that this is what ends up happening to some of these people after the fact. Some of the people end up, because the shooting, as Zach was saying, was against this feminist group that was at the college that wanted to become engineers. There's this big vendetta on trying to stop that. So it's again one of those movies where it's such a bleak incident, but the hope comes in that something like this can happen, and it doesn't deter you from the main goal, from the motive, from what they were trying to stop, and thus it's a loss for the person who was trying to do the thing. I think that's why it really stuck with me. I agree with you. There are several movies that cover this topic that are out there. I even thought of do you remember I think it was Vox Lux that came out not too long ago, Natalie Portman, that also covers a shooting in the same way, that it was inspired by you scrolling the news, and it's just like new albums and this and a shooting that happened outside of a concert, and then you just keep scrolling and it's just pop star news, and you just don't even think about it. I think the artistry that you guys were alluding to of using black and white so that the blood doesn't stand out, it doesn't feel sensationalized. There's this one shot where one of the students, because he's mainly targeting women, when he comes out of the room and he's so disoriented, he's falling from the top because the camera is in that way. There's several shots where he's just he flips it upside down so that you're getting a different perspective of what the place looks like. I thought a lot of it was profound. I thought the characters were really interesting, the things that they do from the beginning to the end, and I don't want to say I liked it, obviously, because of the subject matter, but I thought he handled it very well. You found
it effective, yeah.
And the history of it, dude. This happened in 89?
Yeah.
In Quebec? Just the idea of, obviously, for Americans, we've had so many, sadly. But it would have been 99 when Columbine happened, or 97. And at that point, you had 10 years where an incident happened that, would have defined what these shootings were. And it was America who sensationalized it. I thought that was the rabbit hole that I went under afterwards. Just this idea that we don't remember that incident. We remember the American one. That was very similar in terms of its casualties. But again, maybe it's the filming of it. I know Chase said he was doing a breakdown of it. That was one thing that I remember when I had seen several movies. It's how do you approach the subject? I will agree with Chase. Changing the names doesn't really mean anything when you have characters who are hiding in very specific ways and you know that that's your daughter's story. You can change the name all you want. That's how my daughter went. That is her story of how the incident went down. But having the credits be a memorial for them before it is all the people who are in it, I thought was also pretty moving. So, again, it's not going to beat any of the ones that are moving on from our first slate. But
yeah, you're not putting it over Dune Part 2?
Nah, but I thought it was pretty profound.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly leaves an impact.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see what Chase ultimately comes up with for his rank list. What to say about it?
We'll see. I'm still figuring that part out.
All right, let's go to our last first round matchup, which is a pair of short films that Denis made in 2011 versus Arrival. He makes 2 short films. Rated R for Nudity, which is described as a playful attempt at mass hypnosis. It's a movie that uses subliminal messaging techniques to tell a story about film and memory, but honestly, I didn't get a whole lot out of it other than, like, I'm not even sure when and where this one premiered. I don't know why he really made this one. It does have, like, an epilepsy warning on that, so maybe you should mention that, but I think he even says somewhere in this that he thought his first film, August 32nd on Earth, was a disaster. So that was mildly interesting, but I don't know. Did you guys get anything from this movie?
A headache?
I can't believe I'm going to be the one that defends it slightly. I didn't like it that much, but the first time I watched it, I should have done a rewatch log, I guess, on Letterboxd, but I played it. I was ready to do the half star, and I was like, So I go back to that interview I was alluding to where he kind of talked about himself, because I think there's a lot of filmmakers like this, but I think specifically like Denis and Nolan are 2 people that are so private and don't really talk about their lives that I found it interesting that someone would kind of do their own 1 minute like autobiography to let you know how they feel about their work before, actually saying it and doing it in an experimental thing that it brought me flashbacks to film school, like Media 1A class, which was like visual art. And it's just like the type of video I can't stand and the type of people I can't stand. But regardless, I thought it was, he said masterpiece and Indendies popped up and I was like, I can't disagree with the guy. Like, he knows, he's got the ego. Like there's one
He's
thing.
not lying.
Yeah, like we'll talk about it in a bit, but I think Denis is like, there's a lot of people that act humble and they're like, I'm not one of the best, but he specifically said he took Blade Runner 2049 because he didn't trust anybody else taking it, which is, I think it's interesting to see, like, he knows he's that guy. You know what I mean?
Right.
I would never watch this again, but I found something interesting about it, I guess.
And then he also makes Empirical Study on the Influence of Sound on the Persistence of Vision.
Yeah, I got nothing for that one.
Yeah, it also probably needs an epilepsy warning. It's a minute of the screen flashing between green and red while heavy metal drums bang away relentlessly, and then it ends with the sound of a monkey. I'm sure there's intellectual reason for it existing.
Yes.
Absolutely baffled as to what it is, and now my eyes hurt. I made you guys watch it before we start. Art, you're taking it over Rated R for Nudity?
Oh, between these two? Nah, I'd go for Rated R for Nudity.
It's like the inverse Barry Jenkins thing, Barry Jenkins, one for you, one for them, he did the Lion King. Denis, he gets his stuff out in like a 1 minute experimental. No one will ever watch it. That's his one for him.
The end from Babylon, but in text form. That's what he did right there.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so neither of these short films is going to beat Arrival, and we're down to the 8 best films, all features from Denis Villeneuve. We only got one of the French language movies in here, but it is a pretty good one. Why don't we start our second round with a matchup between Dune from 2021 and Dune Part 2 from 2024. We can only do one of these movies, and Chase, why don't you start us off? Which of the Frank Herbert adaptations from Denis do you prefer?
I'm interested to hear what you guys think, because I remember I watched some of your review when it came out, and it seemed like you were either picking the first one or pretty much on end. So here's the thing, all right? Dune Part 2 is so much better than Dune Part 1. Maybe not so much better, but I really... and someone came at me because I called it a sequel. You could call it whatever you want, a Part 2, same movie, whatever you want to do. The Part 2, the sequel, whatever, it's just, it's really rare. It's like I compared it at first to Batman Begins, where every aspect of the movie is just better in the second one. The only thing I could think the first one does better is there's a couple cooler costumes. I'll give it to you. But I do really like the first Dune. I liked it a little bit less the second time I watched it at home, right before I watched Dune Part 2. And even now, I don't have that much of a desire to rewatch Part 1 versus Part 2. I feel like I could watch it every day, and I don't need that aspect of a movie to say it's one of my favorite movies. Like some of my favorite movies, like Come and See, I'm not saying I'm going to rewatch that all the time. It's still one of my favorite movies, you know what I mean? But Dune Part 2 is just so good at everything. And it's very rare we get a blockbuster that's like that. It's epic, and it actually feels epic. There's so many moments where I say, wow, and that's what I really look for in blockbuster filmmaking these days. The performances are incredible. It's everything that is incredible in the first one is still incredible here. It's just more incredible. I love this movie. I drove 3.5 hours to watch a 3-hour movie and drove 3.5 hours back the same night. You know what I mean? And I don't do that for every movie. And maybe you guys feel differently. I don't know. And we could keep going into it if I have to convince you. But I just really think Part 2 is one of the best sci-fi movies ever made. And Dune Part 1 is one of the best sci-fi movies of the past 10 years type thing. That's how I feel.
All right. Art, you're the Dune guy. Let's hear it. You're going with Part 1, Part 2, the as yet not made Part 3?
I've driven for both. I've flown for both. I love both of these. To me, they are so interchangeable. I can go either way with either one, because Dune, to me, has Oscar Isaac. That is such a missing piece from the second one that obviously Timmy's supposed to like kind of take up the mantle for. But I think he's such a rock for the first one. I think the Baron is better in the first one, but you still get him in Dune Part 2. I think there's a lot of aspects to the first Dune that when you get hit with those score the first time around, the sand worm scene, I think, is better in that one. I know you get it fighting over here, but the like inception of seeing it for the first time and the majesticness of it, there's a lot in both movies. I can go either way. I agree with Chase, though. There is so much spectacle in Dune Part 2. That was the movie that, while people were iffy on Dune and some people were saying, no, join the cult, Dune Part 2 had everybody recounting Dune Part 1 as if they loved it just as much as this new one, right? I don't know, again, if it's this back and forth between Nolan and him where they're just setting up this IMAX eventness type thing where people just want to be a part of it. The relationship with Zendaya is fleshed out here way more. Timmy is better in this movie. Bro, the black and white infrared shot scenes up there, that scene alone may be the thing that for today, I'm willing to have it go just ahead. Because that's an incredible character that they also introduced there. I love them both equally. They are both 4.5s for me. I think it's some of the best stuff that he's done. Yeah. Dune Part 2 for the next minute. Unless Jack changes my mind.
No, I mean, look, I think that if Dune Part 1 is like the start of a roller coaster, Dune Part 2 is when you hit the flip, when you go in the loop. It's the part that you're there for. It's got the real like highlights, the climaxes. I mean, I'm missing me some Oscar Isaac, and I really love Duncan Idaho, but Dune Part 2 is where it's at. It's such a thrill. It's so much fun. It's one of the best blockbusters of all time. As Jay said, I think that's actually an apt way of putting it, because these are both like really incredible movies, but it's like the tiers of incredible maybe are a little bit skewed in Dune Part 2's direction. So we're going to make that a clean sweep in favor of Lisan El Gaib and advance Dune Part 2 to the semifinals. And then let's talk about a pair of thrillers from Denis. Prisoners from 2013 versus Sicario from 2015. Art. An easy answer for you? Not even thinking about Prisoners?
Bro, I had that in the holster. What you talking about? Sicario, let's go.
Why Sicario? Make the argument.
Is good. I think that this is a movie that, while we have had the yellow tinting happening for the longest time, something makes an impact. When they then start blaming Sicario for the yellow filter, it's like, nah, that's been everywhere. It just shows you what this movie had going for it. Bro, name me another score that was able to go up there with the Jaws theme in terms of thrillers than this one right here. Rest in peace, Johan, bro. I wish he was coming back for the next ones. The performances all around. The theories I have for this damn movie right here. This is one of the best movies. This was my favorite of his for a long time. Prisoners is great, and once I have kids, it's going to turn into a horror movie. But I'm going Sicario right now.
All right, that's one vote for Sicario. Chase, are you a man of the desert, or are you going with Prisoners?
I got some story time for you. So I was 16 years old. And 16 is that age right before you get the driver's license in Jersey. So me and my friend, we went to the theater. His mom bought a ticket with us, but she had to dip out. So we're sitting in the theater, and it was the one time the manager caught us and said, "You guys got to get out of here." So we didn't get to watch Prisoners. I call my dad. I say, "Hey, Dad, we're trying to watch this thriller. I know you saw the commercials. I know it looks like a basic thriller movie. It's kidnappings, whatever. It'll probably be okay. Do you want to watch it? He said, I could be there in 3 hours. So we watch Insidious Chapter 2. Don't remember anything about that, but I remember Prisoners to this day it's the best David Fincher type movie, I think. I really think the mystery itself is really great, but like I mentioned earlier, some of the performances from these people I think is their best performance. You guys could correct me if I'm wrong. I can't think of a time Hugh Jackman is better than this movie. He is unbelievable. When he breaks the sink, he is so good.
It's the Hugh
Paul
Jackman
Dano's
that we need
incredible.
more of in movies.
Yeah, even people like Viola Davis, who aren't even in it that much, are incredible. Jake Gyllenhaal is incredible. And that's why it pains me, because Sicario is the better movie. It's just so good. And I'm going to save my other points for the next round. But I'm picking Sicario, even though I love Prisoners to death.
You see that about Chappie. Chappie. Okay. No, you're not wrong there. It is his best performance.
I mean, Prisoners is a lot of incredible performers and performances all in one movie, and just one of the bleakest movies that maybe I've ever seen. Like, you feel like you need a hot shower or maybe a cold shower after watching it. It is not for the faint of heart, but yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna all go with Sicario on this one.
And I will add real quick, I think we all kind of forget, like, kind of how I was bringing up, Prisoners was like one of the biggest surprise movies, I feel like, of that decade. Like, no one expected it to be as good as it was. And
it ruined the Taken franchise.
Yeah, exactly.
I swear to you, it just pummeled after that. It's like, no, we don't want that.
That's why my dad didn't want to go. He's like, why would I waste my time on a basic kidnapping movie? And it put him on the map for a reason.
Easily. The ending, to this day, incredible ending.
Yeah.
Shout out Paul Dano, bro. I thought you were going to say it was Paul Dano's best performance. I would have argued with you there because
I'm not going
he
that
delivers
far,
so many. But yeah, no. Hey, I have them both rated equally too. I would have Sicario edge out probably most days for sure.
Yeah, I feel like I have a vague memory of hearing the buzz about Prisoners out of like I think it premiered at Telluride, but looking back, it was less than a month between its Telluride premiere and when it was in theaters in the US. And cool. I feel like it just did not have, like Chase is saying, that much buzz about it, but it started to get like the word of mouth of like, there's this really incredible movie. And if you caught it in that wave, it really, really just would have taken you by surprise. It is a stunning movie. And I wouldn't be surprised to see some people argue that it should have beat Sicario, but nobody on this panel is going to make that argument. Our next matchup is between 2013's Enemy and 2017's Blade Runner 2049. Chase, what do you got in this matchup?
Earlier in the podcast, we talked about how sometimes characters are a little stiff for my liking, and I think I'm still trying to convince myself that I think Blade Runner 2049 is better than it actually is. And I know it's everyone's favorite. I know people love it. I'm not going to say it's, I mean, I guess it's overrated, but I wouldn't say it's like a bad movie. I still think it's a really solid movie technically. Yeah. That being said, the first Blade Runner took me 4 watches for me to actually love it. I hated it the first 3, and every time somebody new would be like, no, you got to watch this cut, you got to watch that cut.
Right.
Yeah. And then like when I was 20, it was right before this one came out, I finally got the appeal of the first Blade Runner, and I rewatched them both recently, and I just think the first one is so much better, and maybe that's because the style, that like 80s, whatever year it came out style, is so much cooler now than the modern take on that retro style. Mm-hmm. I just think even though I really like the Ana de Armas aspect of this one with the whole like futuristic AI dating or whatever, I think that part of the technology is cool, but I just love how they took technology back in the original so much more, and the characters are so much more interesting. That one has a creepier aspect with like the little toy people walking around. Like there's stuff in the first one that I just like more. Then Blade Runner 2049, even though visually it looks incredible and all that, it's just way too long. I never have a desire to rewatch it as much as some of the other stuff. It feels like it's 3 hours. It feels like it's 3.5 hours. Enemy, on the other hand, is very short, so that's why I'm picking it. But also because even though Enemy came out at the time where I know we all kind of started YouTube around the same time, Enemy was one of the first movies I remember people talking about on YouTube. Like, yo, we got to break down this movie. Like, it's
Yes,
it's a puzzle.
sir.
It's crazy.
It might be the first movie I ever watched an ending explained for.
Same here. Yeah, there was nothing I had really seen. I mean, I wasn't like a cinema buff when I was however old, like 16 when it came out, but there was nothing really like that coming out. And it was so cool to see what other people thought the big spider at the end meant. Like, no one walked out of the movie being like, oh yeah, I know exactly what it was about. So that was a cool aspect of it. Rewatching it, I don't love it as much as I used to. There was a point in my life where I considered Enemy one of my favorites of all time. I'm probably not there anymore, but I still really like it a lot, and I would pick it over Blade Runner 2, for sure.
Art, what are you going with, Blade Runner or Enemy?
I like Blade Runner a lot. I think it's a good movie. I don't love it. So that's like one of the ones where I pull up my score and I say 4 stars and I go, damn, I hated it. Wow, that's so low for a Danny movie. Oh my gosh.
Well, for a certain brand of cinephile, Blade Runner 2049 is like just about as good as it gets. Like, there's some people who think that movie is everything.
I know it because there's only one, like, this is one of the videos where I get weekly comments to this day, bro. Like, people love this movie. They love seeking videos of this movie out, all that stuff. And I think it's solid. I definitely would want to rewatch it again if it gets released properly, because this is one of those ones, like a Dunkirk, where I didn't get to see it in the best theater. I saw it in some rinky-dink, out-of-town theater, and I think that definitely also pushes the experience back. But even with that, I remember exactly where I was sitting when I came out of Enemy. Like, y'all, this was the one that you just wanted to analyze to pieces. This was one of the ones that got me into, like, no, I want to explain movies. I want to talk about what this could possibly mean, because it didn't even matter if I understood it all. I felt it all, bro. This was a spiritual experience, what he was putting up on that screen. I think it's one of Jake Gyllenhaal's best performances. I think the subtext in there is
2 of Jake Gyllenhaal's best performances.
incredible. With Prisoners as well, yeah. Well, yes. 2 of his. I love Enemy. It is one of my favorites. I'm going Enemy all the way for sure.
Yeah. I feel like I can echo most of what Chase was saying, that like, while I like respect a lot of Blade Runner, I don't know if I've ever connected either to the original or this one in the way that I know other people do. And while I feel like there's an argument to be made that Blade Runner 2049 is Denis' best looking movie, just the production design details and the pink hue over everything. It's really, really incredible. I got to go Enemy in this matchup.
30 people just turned off this podcast.
I know this is definitely the one where we're going to make some enemies of
bro.
audience.
I know people like Under the Skin. Like, that's the movie a lot of people vibe with.
Yeah.
This to me is like my Under the Skin. The way people have that love for that movie as an art house flick, that's Enemy for me.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of lovers of Enemy out there too. So hopefully you're watching this podcast and you can defend our honor.
In due time, you think it'd grow on you? The way Chase said, Blade Runner, rewatching the original.
Perhaps, yeah, and they're both movies that I want to revisit again. So, maybe I'll look back at this podcast in 2049 and think I'm an idiot. But for now,
we're still here floating. That is the one where he said that he felt the most pressure, not because he felt he did anything wrong. There was like for years rumors that he had like beef with the studio heads, and the studio heads came on. They're like, no, we gave him everything. He was so hard on himself every time he filmed because he put so much pressure on him. And then he goes and he does Dune, where he reminds himself that fear is the mind killer, and look at him handle it. So,
yeah,
is there an argument to be?
There an argument to be made? He's like the best person to trust with your IP at the moment, because Christopher Nolan is out there mostly making original properties, but Denis, we're mostly getting adaptations from him.
Because he makes the adaptations feel like original properties.
Right. Great way of putting it.
And Sean Levy's in charge of Star Wars, so it's crazy. It's crazy.
All right, let's go to our final matchup of the quarterfinals. This is going to be between 2010's Indendies on Sundays. I don't know how it's pronounced, but I know it means burning flames. I did look that up in French. Versus 2016's Arrival. Indendies is the only French language film, I should say, on our bracket left. Chase, are you going to let its run end here, or are you going to go against
another
Arrival.
story time. It was right before I was going to college, and I knew I was going to film school, so I had to catch up on a couple movies to make myself seem educated, I guess. And Incendies, however you say it, came in the mail from Netflix. I popped in the disc.
From the mail.
The mail.
Damn,
we had
old
the
man.
mail
Disc.
Netflix back in the day. Yeah, we put the disc in back when those existed.
In a way.
And my dad still to this day heard me scream, "Wow!" at the ending. Like, I have never.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're watching this podcast, you've probably seen the movie. I won't say what happens necessarily, but I really do think it's the best twist I've ever seen in a movie. It just blows my mind every single time. And even though if I watched it for the first time now, maybe I could put some things together and call it. But back then, it just blew my mind. And even if you know what the twist is, this movie is just incredible from start to finish. It's genius in the way it tells both the mom's story and the kids' stories. I've seen some people argue that the kids aren't as interesting as characters. I can understand that point of view for sure. But I just don't think many thrillers / mysteries are as good as this one. It's the movie. Denis saw the play and he said he wasn't going to make a movie until he was inspired by something and he saw it. He said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to be a filmmaker again because this is wild." And he turned it into this movie, and I hope it makes it. Maybe I'll have to defend it in a second. Arrival is a great movie. Don't get me wrong. It's mid-tier Denis for me. Part of the reason, this is going to sound so stupid, the song that's used in the beginning, I forget the title. They use it in Shutter Island 2. It was used in an acting compilation me and my dad used to watch all the time, the best acting of all time, on a loop. Like, we watch this once a week. And when the movie opened with that, I said, damn, this cheapens my experience a little bit. I'm not going to lie. It's like if a movie came out now and it used a TikTok sound to open the movie. That's how I felt. I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of weird. That being said, if you take that out, Arrival is a great movie. I don't think the twist of Arrival hits nearly as hard as Incendies. Amy Adams is really good in it. I'm not going to take that away. Really good sci-fi. I'm not here to shit on Arrival. Sorry if I cursed. But Incendies is...
It's fucking fine, don't worry.
It's really just one of my favorite movies. And if I have to keep persuading somebody here, maybe I'll go deeper. But for now, I'm picking that.
All right. Well, to make things interesting, I think I'm going to go with Arrival. I feel like a lot of the ways that you feel about Incendies, I feel about Arrival, because the way that twist impacted me was just devastating. I think, the way that twists work in a lot of movies, it's sort of like the reveal of information you hadn't considered. But I think the way that Arrival employs its twist, it is such like a hit from the side. Like, it's not, sometimes you're expecting the collision straight on, and the way that he's able to almost get you to interpret experience differently. I've just never had that experience in a film, and particularly in a sci-fi movie, to engage you with not just engage you with aliens, but an alien way of thinking, I think is really remarkable. I don't know. To me, Arrival is an all-timer sci-fi film, and maybe my favorite Denis movie as well.
Oh,
so when I saw this matchup happening, I got pretty nervous because I know Art likes both of these movies. I don't know which one he likes more.
I don't know either, so that's really interesting that y'all give it to me at the end. 'Cause
The bus scene is better than anything in Arrival, man. The bus scene is better than anything in Arrival.
look, Incendies is a masterpiece. There's a reason why he said it in a short film.
Damn it.
He did. He said, Incendies is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
I could go with Incendies.
Oh, okay.
I have no problem going there. Y'all have not convinced me out of the way. Both of these movies are 5 stars for me. I have Incendies at 5 stars the moment that I saw it. I think it was the week I created my letterbox. I was like, yes, this is what this thing is for. It has never changed. But Arrival keeps going up, and it's just as great. I can't believe you called it mid, bro. That ending.
mid for Denis, not mid in general. Let me specify.
Bro, that'll be around forever. Arrival is out of all the videos I've ever made, my favorite video that I've edited.
Oh.
That's how much I love that movie. But Incendies is the one I recommend all the time as well.
with Arrival particularly, that movie looks so beautiful that I find myself Googling, what's Bradford Young up to? Like every
Solo?
6 months. Like that's a cinematographer who needs to work more. Another interesting thing about this matchup in particular, by the way, Indendies was the first time one of his films got nominated at the Best International Language Oscar category, and then Arrival became the first time one of his films got nominated for Best Picture.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah. Enemy, Indendies, and Arrival are my favorite Denny movies. They are all 5 stars in my opinion. They, for whatever reason, were all put on the right side of this bracket.
Blame Letterboxd popularity, not me.
And today I'm going with Arrival.
Ooh. Any final sentiments towards Indendies, either Chase or Art? Like, you guys
Watch it.
both really, really love this movie. This is one that I actually hadn't seen before this bracket. And I was up last night just like expecting to kind of force myself through it because it was so late and it's a foreign film, so I'm reading the subtitles.
Bro, if you would have sat with it, we might be having a different conversation right now.
I sat with it all morning. I got some time to mull it over. I love Arrival, though. Arrival's my number 1 Denny movie. I'll spoil that here.
That's fair. How did the twist hit you as someone that's seen way more movies at this point in your life than I did at the time I first watched it?
I think the idea of gathering round the family to reveal a secret about your past is kind of like the thing that every storyteller wishes they could execute, and it's just about the best version of that sort of story you could think of. Just in the way that it sort of deepens all these characters, and I love the chronology of it, the slipping back and forth throughout time. It's really great. Like I kind of went into it sort of ready to say like, oh, this one's not going to be as good as Arrival, so we have to vote for Arrival. It's really great. It's hard to not advance it, but like I said, I just really love Arrival.
I will say it was my number 1 until on the rewatch when the kids know what is happening and they ask, does 1 + 1 sometimes equal 1? And there's like a cringy gasp for a second, and I was like, okay, you're number 2. Like you're just going 1 slow back down. But it's still one of my favorite movies of all time. Arrival's a great movie. Again, mid-tier Denis is better than Shyamalan's best movie. You know what I mean? Like there's different levels.
Damn, bro.
All right, well, we're down to 4 pretty incredible Denis Villeneuve movies. They are Dune Part 2, Sicario, Enemy, and Arrival. Art, are you going to go with Dune or Sicario here? Pretty tough choice.
That is a pretty tough choice. Dune Part 2 or Sicario? Wow.
Talk it out. What do you like about these movies?
Well, again, I think one is much more of a bigger spectacle. I think that argument that we had early on about the characters not being as emotional, that I remember that being a huge part of coming out of Sicario. Oh, they're very,
stoic.
Yeah, it's not even that they were like one-dimensional. It's just that they don't tend to show emotion. But I think that's part of what they're going through, in their profession. There's so much. I think that the bridge scene in Sicario is some of the best piece of filmmaking. And then it's followed up by the tunnel scene, which is some of the best filmmaking. There's so much great stuff in Sicario. There's so much great stuff in Part 2. Again, this isn't easy because he's my favorite filmmaker. They can go either way. I don't even have a list. I got a tier. Enemy, Arrival, Indendies, and then it's the Dunes, Sicario, and Prisoners. That's just what happens when you have one of the best filmmakers of all time. I'm going Dune Part 2 today.
Dune Part 2. All right, Chase, are you in agreement, or are you going for Sicario here?
Okay, there was a time in my life where I was even more cynical than I am now, and I said at a certain point every Denis movie was slightly weaker than the last one, and Sicario was kind of in that line where I was like, Sicario is a great movie, but I didn't love it necessarily until I rewatched it a couple months ago, and I am convinced, bar none, this is his best movie. Like, it is unbelievable on a rewatch of Sicario how good every single scene is. And I gotta come up front. Art's kind of the reason I love this movie now. Art, have you ever explained the Daniel Kaluuya character? Because no one talks about it online, and you're 100% right on it.
Bro, I got like 100 video ideas that I just have shelved that I probably should.
Okay. I know you just picked Dune Part 2, but do you want to explain the Daniel Kaluuya thing?
No, don't make me talk about it, because then I'm going to switch my opinion.
Because this is unbelievable. Zach, you know about this? Has he ever told you about this?
I don't think you have. Tell me.
This is an exclusive. You got to tell him.
Okay, so Dune Part 2 is very fresh to me. That's probably why I'm edging it out right here. But as you remind me, and I recount Sicario, it is all a movie about agents and who knows what and timing and who's at the right place at the right time. And if you rewatch the movie, only looking at Daniel Kaluuya and you see where he stands and what he does, you realize, just without any spoilers, that that's a character who knows a lot more about the missions than anyone else lets it up. A particular one, just to give it to you, is that he knows when to move before the explosion at the beginning of the movie.
And they never make it. Any other filmmaker would make it a big reveal at the end.
Right.
That this
And then
guy
you
was
hear
in
the
on the
interviews.
entire thing. And they don't
it's
do
goated.
it. It's crazy.
Zach doubts me initially, always. But once he watches it again, it's going to be right there.
Like,
I tell him this stuff all the time.
The very first scene, like you said, with the explosion, and my girlfriend and my roommate, they were convinced, like, nah, like that can't be real. So I replayed the first scene, and they both watched him, and they looked at me like, okay, that's pretty wild. You know? Like, it is. You will never think of Sicario the same way when you have that piece of information that Daniel Kaluuya is like part of the problem. So I'll say, and just every single scene, every single line of dialogue he has it's like so obvious. It's not even a theory. It's like it's got to be a confirmed thing at this point that no one on Reddit has even dove into. It is insane. It blows my mind. And when you put that in a movie where every single scene is a banger from start to finish, it's unbelievable. All the performances are incredible. The characters are amazing. The dinner table scene made everyone's jaw drop in the theater and made my jaw drop today. The ending is the perfect bow of everything we just did not matter.
Okay.
And I love Dune Part 2, but Sicario is the best Call of Duty movie we will never get. It is awesome.
All right, man. That's super compelling. I can't wait for the ending explained or the TikTok or whatever you need to do to break that one down for us.
That's all art.
Hey,
Until
Chase,
we
you
get
convinced me
it,
through me. Sicario.
wait, because I was about to vote Dune Part 2.
Sicario, bro. That ending, it was just recently for Dune Part 2 that, what's his name? Not the guy, what's his name? Because they're both in Dune Part 2 also. What's his name? Brolin has one specific scene where he forgets a line when he's like talking to Emily Blunt about like, yo, just be careful what you think you're getting involved when it's at night. And he looks to the side because he forgot the line and he's looking to try to remember what it is. And then he looks back and he continues it. He goes, that wasn't supposed to make the movie. I really didn't know what I was saying. He edited it in there and he goes, that's probably the most brilliant performance I've ever done. And I didn't even realize I was doing that.
He's so good in the movie too.
So just so we're clear, we're going with Sicario above Riding the Worm, right? Above Lisan Gal Gaib, above. You're confident in this.
I'm I've been confident for 2 months since I rewatched Sicario. It's crazy. Sicario might be like a top 20 movie of all time for me now, and I didn't think that was a possibility at the beginning of 2024. So
yeah.
All right.
If it was Prisoners.
I mean,
Versus Dune
Sicario
Part 2 obviously would have cleared, but Prisoners just went up against Sicario, so never mind. I thought Prisoners was higher for you.
What Dune Part 2 and Prisoners, so how my list is looking is Sicario's 1 and Indendies is 2, and Dune Part 2 and Prisoners have been the 3 and 4, and they kind of switched for me. But
Gotcha.
Art, if we're going the complete Dune saga versus Sicario, are you going Dune saga?
That's 2 movies. Yeah,
that's 2 movies.
Of course, I could possibly do it.
All right. So without cheating, we'll get Sicario into the Denis Villeneuve finals, where it's going to go up either against Enemy or a rival. Arturo, you already said that these are the other 2 5-star Villeneuve movies to you.
But
which one is better? Difference? It's just start us off. Just whet our appetites.
My favorite child is
Sophie's Choice. Let's go.
Well, dang. I'm actually a lot is gonna ride on me because you already said it's your favorite. This man said it's the worst movie he's seen from Denis Villeneuve. So this point, like you are leaving it to me to choose. So
A little bit.
I love Enemy. It's one of my favorite movies.
Period. End of statement.
I love Arrival. It's one of my favorite movies. Damn, bro.
Chase, I think you're going to make the argument for Enemy. Is there anything in particular that Art should consider?
I mean, I think Arrival's the better of the two movies here.
Okay.
Really?
I don't need to pick. Really like. I still really like Enemy. Again, I had to fight for my second favorite movie in the bracket, so I had to take some pegs down for Arrival. But I think Arrival holds up a bit better than Enemy. I do think it's going to be a timeless movie that people look on 20 years from now versus Enemy will be the movie when we're older. We're like, nah, there was this cool movie called Enemy. Like, it's not going to stand the test of time the same. I think Enemy's awesome. I really do. It's lower mid-tier Denis for me at this point. But again,
Lower mid-tier.
lower mid-tier for Denis is better than 90% of the people making movies these days.
Better than anything Shyamalan's made?
Yeah, by far.
Not a Sixth Sense fan, I guess.
Okay, it's the Denny
good.
inflation. Got it. Okay. That's
All right, so if Chase is voting for Arrival, I'm also voting for Arrival, even though, like...
Then I'll throw it for Enemy.
Yeah, the feeling of, like, falling down the rabbit hole that Enemy gives you once you kind of, like, get a little bit more of what's going on, it rivals just about any one of those sort of, like, mind-altering kind of thrillers. My one story time for Enemy is that I watched it when I was staying at a hotel, and the hotel had like really bad contrast on it. So there's the very notable thing that happens right at the end of the movie. But the blacks weren't black enough on my TV, so I just saw an empty room. That's what I thought the ending of Enemy was for first.
He thought it was a Rorschach thing, and he was like, spiders. You
I
guys
was
have a weird phobia.
I sat there for about 20 minutes being like, why do people like this thing? And then I realized what's going on.
I saw it
Is
in
it
the
a
music
Batman
box.
movie? Is that Bruce Wayne? Who is that?
Yeah, the echoes on this thing was crazy. I love it. If we're saying goodbye to it, I think this is one of the best movies dealing with the subconscious and someone who feels this impending doom, as we've been saying, of him doing this mistake, specifically for the film Infidelity, that's just always going to be creeping up on him. And I think the way that they get into that psyche of those split personalities, absolutely fantastic. With all these movies at the end, I feel like Soderbergh losing to himself at the Oscars. Like, I don't care which one gets it. I'm just... it's all top tier for me.
All right, so we are at Sicario and Arrival in the finals. Chase, you said Sicario you think is his best movie. What's the argument for it?
Zach, you said Arrival is his best movie, so now it looks like we're at a bit of a standstill.
Once again.
Here. Yeah. But
Art.
all I'll tell Art is one of these movies has a twist that everyone knows there's a twist, and one has a twist that they don't even tell you is a twist. It's just in the background for you to discover. That's the level of genius we're dealing with here. And I'm just going to leave it at that.
Chase, why don't we do this? Since we're backing competing movies here, why don't you say something nice about Arrival and I'll say something nice about Sicario?
Something nice about Arrival. Okay. CGI is really good. Like, it's a really good message of how we should all communicate.
Yeah.
It's going to be really the opposite of his nuclear war movie that he's working on. You know, this one's the more optimistic view of how we can work together.
There you go.
Yeah, but Sicario's just a better movie.
in a catalog where a lot of Denis films are pretty, as we mentioned before, like downtrodden or pessimistic or cynical, this is one of the hopeful ones. One of the ones that actually like feels almost Christopher Nolan-esque in some of its messaging. As for Sicario, even though I think Arrival's the better movie, I think that I would put the bridge sequence in Sicario up against every sequence in Denis' career. I don't know if there's a sequence that can top it. It's just so thrilling, so just exciting and scary and visceral and effective. So... Look, we're not going to pick a bad movie, whatever ends up winning this bracket. But Art, you got to tell us what's winning this bracket.
Rated R for Nudity is probably the most underrated.
The dark horse.
Sicario is incredible. Arrival is fantastic. I think there's a moment, if we've been comparing him to Nolan, in Interstellar, when she gives that speech about the heart and love and everything else that you can go through, that got him like dissed to shreds because they didn't think he hit it on there. I was also one where it's like, it's cute, but I'm critical of it. I don't think this is the sci-fi that's really getting that point across. And then I saw Arrival, and I think Arrival did that. He did what Nolan couldn't do in Nolan's biggest movie, Interstellar. I'm going Arrival today.
I'd take this Amy Adams performance against maybe any other of her performances. It's crazy. She wasn't even nominated, right?
I know.
It's crazy in retrospect. It's so good. I mean, Jeremy Renner's good in this movie. Man,
the aliens are good.
I don't know why Bradford Young isn't like constantly working. Like he shot this. He shot A Most Violent Year. He shot Selma. Where's that dude at?
Taking a vacation like Denny did for a couple of years.
Yeah. All right. So Arrival makes it to the top of our bracket. Chase, are you okay with such a mid-tier movie winning the Villeneuve
I guess
bracket?
I am, you know. I mean, maybe I'm going to get grilled in the comments section, but I'm more of an Interstellar guy myself. I think the Matthew McConaughey crying tops any emotion in Arrival.
That is good.
Maybe that's a hot take. I don't know. But, I mean, Arrival's everyone else's favorite movie. I admit I'm wrong, you know. I just have to be honest here. I just got to say. I'm telling you, Zach, if you rewatch Sicario this weekend and look at Daniel Kaluuya, we might have to re-record this.
I'm going to cue it up right now. I'm going to cue it up right now and figure out get to the bottom of this character. But yeah.
But it's a good representation of who he is. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to argue that.
Yeah. I mean, that with a filmmaker like him, as we keep saying, like the consistency, the catalog, it's all there. You're choosing between great movies. Even the ones that are mid-tier are still better than Shyamalan's movies. It's just a really great bounty of cinema, and it's great to revisit them and talk about them again. It's been a pleasure to rewatch some of these in order to make this bracket. So yeah, if you haven't had a chance to catch up with some of these movies, now is as good a time as any. You know, Denis talked about how he's going to take a break from the Dune movies before he comes back to part 3. Art, are you excited for what he's got in store as our resident Villeneuve appreciator?
Yeah, I'm very curious to see what breaks he takes and what he's able to learn outside of it, because I also want the next Dune to be different. Like, I don't want it to be almost a part 3. If it's not going to have the part in the title, I want it to be something where he's approaching it drastically from another perspective. I know that they're working on the show, and they got casting announcements as we're recording today out there. I think that there is a lot of other worlds that he could build. I don't want him to be stuck in the Dune franchise forever, so I'm very curious to see what different genres he's able to tackle. Give me a real comedy. That'd be interesting. If he tackles that, that's best director of all time, in my opinion.
Yeah, Chase, among the rumored projects that Villeneuve is circling next there's that nuclear war movie that you were talking about. There's, of course, Dune Part 3 out there. He's also talked about making a Cleopatra movie with Zendaya, and also this project called Rendezvous with Rama, which is based on an Arthur C. Clarke novel. It's an astronaut film. Among all the potential avenues for Villeneuve, what's the one that you're most excited to see him maybe take next?
Like I said, this is one of the few directors working today where I trust whatever he's going to do. I bet all 4 are going to be bangers.
Yeah.
I do know a lot of the nerdiest people online are stoked for Rendezvous with Rama. So whatever the deal it is with that, I'm sure he's going to kill. Nuclear war, I hope we get that before we all get nuked. I'm really optimistic about that. The Cleopatra with Zendaya, is she confirmed for that? Is that like official, or is that just
I don't know
rumor?
if it's official. It's just sort of been batted around, but I feel like
Gotcha.
I feel like filmmakers have for decades been trying to do a Cleopatra movie, and I don't know if I trust most of them, but I kind of trust Villeneuve.
No, I trust him too, for sure. I mean, I'm super stoked for Dune Messiah. I'm curious, because isn't there like a 15-year gap or something like that during part 2 and 3? So we'll see when that actually comes out. Yeah. I'm cool with him not doing Sicario 3, so when they reveal that Daniel Kaluuya is a rat and everyone says, oh, this is so corny, like Denny's name is not going to be on it, you know? Like he put the genius, him and Sheridan did that. So,
Sheridan,
like I said.
Sheridan said he's got that script ready.
Yeah, that's the other thing I wanted to mention that I forgot to before. You know, he has a writing credit. He adapted the play for Indendies. And after that, he doesn't have his name on another script until Dune. So as he's sort of like backed away from writing. It's been interesting to see the kind of scripts he gravitates towards, but I think he's planning to write at least some of those upcoming movies. So it'll be interesting to see the difference between a Denis movie that he has screenwriting credits on and one that he doesn't. That'll be something for us to approach on a future bracket. But thank you both for hanging out and talking Villeneuve. Chase, thank you so much for joining us for this bracket. Where can people find more from you?
Thank you for having me on. Yeah, absolutely.
Our pleasure, always.
You could find me at Chase Azarian. It's no more a few mixed reviews, chilling with Chase. All the names I tried in my past, it's just my name
still
now.
Mixed though.
Yeah. So, if you want to hear about what other movies are mid, I got a lot of those coming up. Working on my Denis Villeneuve ranked video, along with the Coen Brothers video. So those will be the next two, and trying to do a Spider-Man ranked one as well, because been catching those movies in theaters as they re-release. So that's been pretty cool.
Yeah, it's been crazy, right?
Yeah.
I got
It's
my
been
poster somewhere.
crazy to see them by Disney World, where there's a lot of Marvel fans down here. Yeah. Clap at everything. So that part of it's kind of annoying. But that's where you can find me.
Very cool. Thanks again for joining us, Chase. We'll have to bring you on in less than 5 years for the next one. Art, where can people find more from you?
You can find me over at LME Movies on Twitter, Letterboxd, Instagram, YouTube, all that good stuff for every week here on the Intercut Podcast.
You can catch more from me at Zshevich across social media, or more videos from me wherever you find videos at Multiplex Show. And you can catch more from this podcast on any podcatcher you use, whether that's iTunes, Pocket Casts, Overcast, Spotify. Just search up Intercut Pod and make sure you subscribe not just to the audio podcast, but to the video feed as well. YouTube.com/IntercutPod, where you can watch our puzzled faces as we break down what the best Denis Villeneuve movie is. It's Arrival. It is Arrival. We all decided it's Arrival. Find new episodes of the Intercut Podcast weekly. Weekend must-watch streaming on our YouTube channel every Monday. And please leave us a comment, like the videos. Consider heading over to iTunes to give us that much requested 5-star review. It really helps the show when you do. You can also follow us across social media, whether that's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. All of our pages are at Intercut Pod, including our Patreon, where you can support the podcast for as little as $3 a month, or right here on YouTube, where you can click join to become a member of the show and get access to all sorts of behind-the-scenes materials and early looks at videos just like this one. This one is live streaming for patrons days before it's going to be made available to the public.
They're watching it right now.
That's kind of cool, right? Yeah. Shout out to Matthew. We got a question from him that we're gonna
got us right there.
Yeah. What's the Denis Mount Rushmore for each of you? Art, you were just saying that you got Enemy, Indendies, and Arrival in that top 3. Are you rounding it out with Sicario or one of the Dunes?
Prisoners, Sicario, and the Dunes. Those are 4.5s for me. Like that, they're all right there. Eventually, I know on rewatches, my Mount Rushmore. How many heads are on? 4?
4. Last I checked.
I'm gonna add even more on there, but as of right now, my 5 stars for sure. And this is from someone who loves Prisoners, Sicario, and Dune. It's Enemy, Indendies, Arrival. Those are the 3 that are just, depending on the day on what I'm going for, that's my Denny. Those 3 made me one of the biggest fans of him, and why he's one of my favorite directors, if not the best director, in my opinion, working today.
Chase, do you have a Villeneuve Mount Rushmore?
For sure. It's definitely Sicario 1, Indendies 2, and then Prisoners and Dune Part 2 definitely take their 2 spots, but 3 and 4 kind of switch for me. Depends on the day. I'm starting to lean a little bit towards Dune Part 2, though. But I want to rewatch it at home, not in the theater, and then I'll make that decision from there.
But Sicario's the one where every time you watch it, it goes up. Indendies, just a little bit off.
Well, Sicario just got the biggest jump I ever expected. Like it was that was a mid-tier Denis movie until I rewatched it. And I was like, oh, this is by far his best movie. I was like, this is by far his best movie.
Hold on. No,
and no one's talking about it.
I'm going to hit you within the week, bro. I'll get you a theory for Arrival.
Absolutely. I'm going to get a text from Zach at 2 a.m. like, bro, you're so right.
Did you see what Jeremy Renner was doing during the movie?
Caitlin's going to edit the winner.
Yeah. I got Arrival, of course. I think I got Sicario on there too. It's a great movie. I don't know why I'm arguing against it. It might jump. I need to give it a rewatch. I'd put Dune Part 2 on there right now, and then I might round it out with Enemy. That honestly on Sundays is so fresh, but I think I like that one more.
Bro. It's a masterpiece.
All right, so I'll put Indendies up there as well.
3 masterpieces?
So do we all have Incendies, and we all have Sicario, at least in the Mount Rushmore. So maybe that's what the true winners of this bracket are.
Incendies and Sicario.
They are in my heart, so.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for the question on the live stream, Matthew. And if you also want to shoot us a question during the recordings of these videos, you can become a patron on patreon.com/intercutpod, or join up on the YouTube membership page. But that's about all for this episode. Thanks again for tuning in. And until next time, you will doubt everything that we do, but in the end, you will understand.